This evening, the president declared a national emergency at the southern border.
He also signed an order signaling he wants to end birthright citizenship to children of non-citizens.
It stops as of 1 o'clock this afternoon.
The promise begins, a pledge that leaves a huge part of the US in chaos as newly elected President Donald Trump begins the illegal immigration crackdown. He has warned about this even during his campaigns, and now it's coming into reality. What does it mean for the country they named the Land of the Free? It must be the start of Trump's so-called dawn of the golden age of America. The policy. Alright, so Trump's back in the White House, and he isn't wasting any time going all in on illegal immigration. He's bringing back old moves and throwing in some new ones to lock down the border, kick people out faster, and basically shake up the whole system. Love it or hate it, this crackdown is making waves, and people have a lot to say about it. Since taking office on January 20th, President Donald Trump has issued a wave of executive orders on immigration, setting the stage for a large-scale crackdown on undocumented migrants in the US. Through more than 21 actions, Trump has taken steps to reform parts of the US immigration system, including the way migrants are processed and deported. The White House has since highlighted some of these initiatives. On Friday, the newly appointed White House press secretary released images of deportation flights being conducted using military cargo planes. Although Trump has vowed mass deportations and widespread arrests, it remains uncertain how much of his plan is currently in effect. Here is an overview of some of Trump's major immigration actions in his first week and how they compare to previous policies. Time for deportation. First things first, Trump's all about beefing up border security. The wall? Yes, more of it is getting built. Plus, he's got high-tech surveillance gear, drones flying around, and AI keeping tabs on things. Border patrols getting more money and more hands on deck to keep things tight. A key pillar of Trump's immigration policy is the removal of undocumented migrants from the US, along with his pledge for mass deportations. To facilitate this, the Defense Department has announced it will deploy military aircraft to deport more than 5,000 individuals detained by Border Patrol in San Diego and El Paso, Texas. ICE statistics reveal that over 1,000 people were deported or repatriated on Thursday, marking the fourth day of Trump's presidency. Border Czar Tom Homan has assured that the pace of deportations will continue to rise steadily. Over the weekend, Trump's deportation flights triggered a brief diplomatic dispute when Colombia's government refused to allow two military planes carrying deported Colombians to land. Colombian President Gustavo Petro criticized the move, stating that the US can't treat Colombian migrants like criminals, and that they should be treated with dignity. However, the Colombian government appeared to relent after the Trump administration threatened economic repercussions, including punitive tariffs. Trump has also reinstated and expanded expedited deportations of undocumented migrants, reviving a policy from his first term that Biden had previously revoked. Expedited removals were previously restricted to areas within 100 miles, 160 kilometers of US international borders, and applied only to individuals who did not seek asylum or failed to present a credible case. Under Trump's changes, these removals can now take place anywhere in the country, affecting undocumented migrants who cannot prove they have resided in the US for over 2 years. Deportations, however, are not exclusive to Trump's administration. Biden also carried out deportations, with 271,000 immigrants removed to 192 countries in fiscal year 2024. Over his 4-year term, Biden oversaw 1.5 million deportations, a number similar to that of Trump's first term, according to the Migration Policy Institute. That figure, however, remains lower than the 2.9 million deportations carried out during Barack Obama's first term. Strengthening the US-Mexico border. Remember the Remain in Mexico policy? It's back, but even stricter. Basically, if you're trying to claim asylum, you have to wait it out in Mexico. The idea is to keep people from flooding in and making sketchy asylum claims just to get in the door. On Wednesday, the Pentagon announced the deployment of 1,500 additional active-duty troops to the southern US border. This increase supplements the 2,500 active-duty personnel already stationed there, marking a 60% boost in military presence, officials confirmed. According to Acting Defense Secretary Robert Salesses, these troops will operate helicopters to assist Border Patrol agents with surveillance efforts. They will also aid in constructing barriers designed to prevent migrants from crossing into the US. Salesses hinted that this is just the beginning, suggesting that more troops may be deployed in the near future. Officials also noted that additional border enforcement missions are being planned, though they did not provide further details. Biden similarly deployed active duty troops to the border, primarily assigning them administrative roles to support Border Patrol operations ahead of the expiration of Title 42, a public health order that had been used to quickly expel migrants during the COVID-19 pandemic. Border crossing saw a sharp decline during Biden's final year in office. In December 2024, the last full month of his presidency, authorities recorded approximately 47,330 migrant apprehensions, down significantly from a peak of nearly 250,000 in December 2023. These figures are lower than the monthly averages during Trump's first term before the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, in May 2019, Border Patrol agents recorded 132,800 migrant encounters. Suspending migrant and asylum processing. Through an executive order, Trump has suspended the entry of all undocumented migrants into the US, instructing Border Patrol agents to turn people away without granting asylum hearings. Previously, migrants arriving at the US border had the legal right to seek asylum. However, in June 2024, the Biden administration also issued an executive order temporarily restricting asylum claims for those who did not arrive through an official port of entry or book an appointment using CBP-1, a mobile application. By September, those restrictions had been further tightened. Trump has also shut down the U.S. refugee resettlement program. Under Biden in 2024, the U.S. admitted over 100,000 refugees, the highest figure since 1995. Additionally, he has ended a major Biden-era program that allowed up to 30,000 migrants per month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to enter the U.S. on humanitarian grounds. Trump has also reinstated the controversial Remain in Mexico policy from his first term, which requires non-Mexican asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their claims are processed in U.S. courts. This policy previously affected about 71,000 people under his first presidency. Immigration advocates have long criticized the policy, arguing that it leaves migrants stranded in Mexico for months, often exposing them to criminal gangs and unsafe conditions. With an estimated backlog of 3.6 million cases in U.S. immigration courts, many migrants are uncertain whether their cases will still be heard, especially as processing delays stretch for years. Trump has also dismissed several top immigration court officials since taking office, a move that could further impact the handling of pending cases. Cancelling migrant appointments. One of the most immediate changes following Trump's return to office was the termination of the CBP-1 smartphone app, which had allowed migrants to schedule appointments with U.S. Border Patrol agents. Launched under the Biden administration, the CBP-1 app was intended to streamline and manage the orderly entry of migrants fleeing persecution. With the app's shutdown, approximately 30,000 people in Mexico who had scheduled appointments were left stranded. According to U.S. government figures obtained by CBS, an estimated 270,000 migrants were waiting on the Mexican side of the border for appointments through the app before its removal. The decision has caused distress among migrants, many of whom endured long and arduous journeys, waiting months for their scheduled meetings. Advocacy groups argue that with the app's cancellation, migrants now have no structured pathway to seek protection in the U.S. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, has since filed a legal challenge against the app's closure. Mexico's construction of migrant shelters. Anticipating an influx of deported migrants due to Trump's policies, Mexico has begun building large tent shelters in 9 border cities to provide temporary housing. Enrique Licon, a municipal official in Ciudad Juarez, located on the border with El Paso, Texas, told Reuters that these shelters will accommodate thousands of people and are expected to be operational within days, calling the initiative unprecedented. The shelters will offer food, medical care, and assistance in obtaining identification documents. Additionally, a fleet of buses will be available to transport Mexican nationals back to their hometowns. This effort is part of a larger government initiative, Mexico Embraces You, designed to assist returning deportees in reintegrating into society. Other countries in the region, such as Guatemala, are also preparing similar measures to absorb returning migrants. However, concerns remain about whether Mexico and its neighbors are adequately prepared to manage the potential surge in deportees. Many of these migrants fled political instability or violent crime in their home countries, raising questions about their safety and well-being upon return. Expanding ICE powers and conducting raids. Several of Trump's executive orders have been aimed at expanding the authority of Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) to arrest and detain undocumented migrants within the U.S. One order overturns a long-standing guideline that restricted immigration raids in sensitive locations such as schools, hospitals, and places of worship. Another directive expands a program that permits ICE to delegate immigration enforcement responsibilities to state and local law enforcement agencies. The extent of ICE's operations since Trump's inauguration remains unclear, but on January the 26th alone, 956 individuals were arrested by ICE and other agencies in cities including Chicago, Newark, and Miami. For comparison, under the Biden administration, ICE detained over 149,700 people in the 2024 fiscal year, averaging about 409 arrests per day. This happened over the last 7 days. It's clearly similar to a national emergency. Everyone is worried, if not for themselves, worried for their friends, neighbors, colleagues, within they have been with for long years. Direct hits. There are many angles in this situation, they said. It's just now the deliberate illegal immigrants who went back doors and continued living in America without minding the laws. For many individuals and families, their concerns vary. The next one is a story not everyone expects and is aware of. Shivering, Marcos pulls his hoodie up, both to hide and shield from the cold. A year ago, at 16, he was forcibly recruited by a drug cartel in Michoacán, Mexico. He and his family fled with only the clothes on their backs. While running an errand, he was surrounded by armed men who ordered him into their truck under threat of killing his family. Held captive with other youths, he was forced into cartel violence before escaping with the help of a sympathetic gang member. Now, Marcos waits in a Tijuana migrant shelter, hoping to claim asylum in the US, but he fears Trump's executive orders on immigration and border security have shattered his chances. I hope they consider individual cases, he says, and that Mr. Trump's heart softens. Trump's new policies, signed upon his return to office, aim to reduce illegal migration, classify cartels as terrorist organizations, and enable military action and deportations. Pastor Albert Rivera, director of a migrant shelter, finds this contradictory. If they're fleeing terrorists, their asylum claims should be stronger. Trump's supporters, like Paula Witzel of the San Diego County Republican Party, welcome the measures, arguing they protect the system from being overwhelmed by migrants. She insists the policies target criminals, not immigrants. However, for those stranded in Mexico with legitimate asylum claims, Trump's orders bring swift consequences. At the Chaparral crossing in Tijuana, 60 migrants, including families, were denied the chance to plead their cases. The CBP One app, Biden's system for asylum applications, was shut down, leaving no legal pathway to cross. Aurelia, living near the border with her epileptic son for 7 months, hoped for medical care in the US. Now, with no asylum process, she's giving up. We have no choice but to go back and trust in God, she says. Despite advice to wait, she's packed her bags. Her vacant tent now awaits another desperate family. It's unjust, she says tearfully. Mexico takes back its people, but the US refuses ours. I just hope God moves him, Trump. So many families are like ours. Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration wasn't just a legal battle. It had real-world effects on the economy and society. Whether people supported his policies or not, there's no denying that they shook things up in a big way. Legal and constitutional challenges of Trump's illegal immigration crackdown. When Trump took office, he wasted no time cracking down on illegal immigration. His policies were tough, controversial, and sparked countless debates across the country. But the real question was, were they even legal? Turns out, many of them ran straight into legal and constitutional roadblocks. One of the biggest issues was the so-called Muslim ban. Officially, it was aimed at restricting travel from certain countries, but critics quickly called it unconstitutional discrimination against Muslims. Courts jumped in and blocked several versions of the ban before the administration finally tweaked it enough to pass legal muster. Even then, it remained a hot-button issue. Then came the family separations at the border. The Trump administration introduced a zero-tolerance policy, which meant that anyone caught crossing illegally was detained and kids were separated from their parents. The move sparked public outrage, lawsuits, and ultimately, a court ruling forcing the administration to reunite families. Judges ruled that the policy violated due process rights and basic human decency. Another major legal battle was over DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. Trump tried to end it, but courts blocked his efforts, arguing that the administration didn't follow proper legal procedures. The Supreme Court eventually stepped in and ruled that the attempt to cancel DACA was arbitrary and capricious, keeping protections for dreamers alive, at least for the time being. Trump also took a hardline stance on sanctuary cities, threatening to withhold federal funding from local governments that refused to cooperate with immigration enforcement. But courts struck down his attempts, ruling that the federal government couldn't force states to follow its immigration policies. The border wall was another legal nightmare. Trump declared a national emergency to divert military funds for construction, but lawsuits quickly followed. Courts questioned whether he had the authority to move money around without congressional approval, though some projects moved forward anyway. In the end, Trump's immigration crackdown faced constant legal hurdles. Some policies got through, others were watered down, and many were blocked altogether. His administration's aggressive approach left a lasting impact on immigration law, but it also underscored the power of the courts in keeping presidential actions in check. One thing's for sure, immigration will continue to be a legal and political battlefield for years to come. Economic fallout. One of the biggest economic hits came in industries that rely on immigrant labor, like agriculture, construction, and hospitality. With fewer undocumented workers around, businesses struggled to find workers willing to take on hard, low-paying jobs. Farmers, in particular, felt the squeeze. Many reported crops rotting in fields because there simply weren't enough hands to pick them. Some even had to shut down or scale back operations. Then there was the impact on local economies. Undocumented immigrants contribute billions in taxes. Yes, even though they're here illegally, many still pay into Social Security and other programs without being able to claim the benefits. When Trump's crackdown forced some to leave or go deeper into hiding, that meant fewer contributions and less spending in local businesses. Fewer workers, fewer customers. It all added up to economic slowdowns in certain areas. The social divide. Beyond the numbers, the crackdown fueled some serious social tensions. Families were torn apart, communities lived in fear, and the debate over immigration got even nastier. The rise in deportations meant that many US citizen children were left behind as their parents were forced out, creating a wave of emotional and financial hardships. Schools and social services had to step in to help, but it was a heavy burden. Meanwhile, cities and states that resisted Trump's policies, so-called sanctuary cities, ended up in legal battles with the federal government. These places often had large immigrant populations that felt directly targeted, leading to protests, advocacy movements, and political clashes. On the flip side, supporters of the crackdown felt it was necessary to uphold the law and protect jobs for American citizens, leading to even more division. Despite all the drama, did the crackdown actually reduce illegal immigration? In some ways, yes. Border crossings dropped for a while and some undocumented immigrants left the US voluntarily, but it didn't solve the root problems. Many businesses still needed workers, and smugglers just found new ways to get people across. The wall, well, parts got built, but it wasn't the magic fix Trump promised. Fast forward to today, and immigration policy remains one of the most hotly debated issues. The Biden administration rolled back many of Trump's policies, focusing on a more humanitarian approach, but challenges remain. Border crossings have fluctuated, and debates over asylum seekers, work visas, and border security continue to dominate headlines. Many of the economic effects persist, with businesses still struggling to fill labor gaps. It's beyond sad reality. The global effect. The aggressive deportation measures strained US relations with key allies. Mexico, a primary recipient of deported individuals, condemned the abrupt return of migrants without coordinated reintegration efforts. The Mexican government, along with other affected Latin American nations, criticized the US for failing to consider the social and economic consequences of its actions. In retaliation, some countries began imposing stricter visa requirements on US citizens and revisited trade agreements that previously benefited American businesses. In Europe, nations with strong pro-migrant policies, such as Germany and France, publicly criticized the humanitarian aspects of Trump's deportation strategy. The European Union raised concerns at the United Nations, arguing that forced removals without due process violated international human rights agreements. This further isolated the US on the global diplomatic stage, reducing its leverage in international negotiations. Beyond economic and diplomatic implications, Trump's deportation policies resulted in significant humanitarian crises. The sudden expulsion of individuals, many of whom had lived in the US for decades, tore families apart and left thousands in limbo. Shelters and refugee camps in Central and South America became overcrowded, and crime rates surged as gangs targeted vulnerable returnees. Additionally, asylum seekers, including those fleeing gang violence and persecution, found themselves denied entry or deported back to dangerous environments. Human rights organizations documented cases where deported individuals faced violence or death upon return, prompting global outcry and legal challenges against the US government. Trump's policies also altered global migration patterns. With the US becoming an increasingly hostile destination, migrants began looking toward alternative regions, including Canada, Europe, and South American countries. Canada, for example, saw an influx of asylum seekers, leading to increased border security measures and immigration policy adjustments. Simultaneously, countries traditionally reliant on remittances and migrant labor in the US sought to diversify their economies to reduce dependence on American employment opportunities. Some Latin American governments expanded workforce training programs and invested in job creation initiatives, attempting to absorb the impact of returning migrants. President Donald Trump's 2025 deportation policies had far-reaching global consequences, affecting economies, diplomatic relations, humanitarian conditions, and migration trends. While his administration argued that these measures were necessary for national security and economic stability, the unintended repercussions created new crises for countries both within and outside of the Western Hemisphere. The international backlash underscored the complex interdependence of global migration and the challenges of addressing immigration through unilateral enforcement policies. As history has shown, mass deportations without robust reintegration plans tend to generate more instability than solutions, a reality that world leaders will continue to grapple with in the years to come. And then, the birthright citizenship. In January 2025, during his second term, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 14160, called Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship. The goal? To put an end to birthright citizenship for kids born in the US to non-citizen parents. Basically, this order tried to change the way we've always understood the 14th Amendment, which, up until now, guaranteed citizenship to just about anyone born on US soil. For a little history, birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment, which was added to the Constitution in 1868. It clearly says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. This was meant to ensure that former slaves had full citizenship rights and to create a clear rule for who gets to be an American. Then, in 1898, a Supreme Court case reaffirmed that if you're born in the US, you're a citizen, no matter where your parents are from. But Trump's executive order tried to change that interpretation. It laid out new rules, saying that US citizenship wouldn't automatically be granted if the mother was in the US illegally when the child was born, and the father wasn't a US citizen or a legal resident. The mother was in the US on a temporary visa, like a student, work, or tourist visa, and the father wasn't a citizen or legal resident. These rules were supposed to take effect starting February 19, 2025. Unsurprisingly, this move triggered immediate legal battles. Civil rights groups and several state attorneys general jumped in, arguing that the order went against the 14th Amendment. Just a few days later, on January 23, 2025, U.S. District Judge John C. Coffneer put a stop to the executive order, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. Trump's push to end birthright citizenship is a major shift in U.S. immigration policy, and it's sparked a heated debate. Supporters say it's necessary to crack down on illegal immigration and protect the integrity of U.S. citizenship. Opponents argue that it undermines core constitutional values and could leave thousands of people stateless. Can he do it? He's doing something that's going to upset a lot of people, but ultimately this will be decided by the courts, said Sai Krishna Prakash, a constitutional expert and University of Virginia Law School professor. This is not something he can decide on his own. Mr. Prakash said that while the president can order employees of federal agencies to interpret citizenship more narrowly, agents with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for example, that would trigger legal challenges from anyone whose citizenship is denied. That could lead to a lengthy court battle, ultimately winding up at the U.S. Supreme Court. The legal foundation of birthright citizenship stems from the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, which grants citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The Supreme Court reaffirmed this principle in United States vs. Wong Kim Ark, 1898, ruling that children born on U.S. soil to non-citizen parents are still U.S. citizens. Any executive action contradicting this precedent would likely face swift legal challenges and be deemed unconstitutional. While some critics argue that the amendment was never meant to apply to undocumented immigrants, altering this long-standing interpretation would require either a Supreme Court reversal or a constitutional amendment, both highly unlikely given historical precedent and political hurdles. According to Pew Research, about 250,000 babies were born to unauthorized immigrant parents in the United States in 2016, which is a 36% decrease from a peak in 2007. By 2022, the latest year that data is available, there were 1.2 million US citizens born to unauthorized immigrant parents, Pew found. But as those children also have children, the cumulative effect of ending birthright citizenship would increase the number of unauthorized immigrants in the country to 4.7 million in 2050, the Migration Policy Institute, a think tank, found. Critics argue that this could create a permanent underclass of stateless individuals who, despite being born in the US, would have no legal claim to citizenship anywhere. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Trump said he thought the children of unauthorized immigrants should be deported alongside their parents, even if they were born in the US. "I don't want to be breaking up families," Trump said last December. "So the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together, and you have to send them all back." Trump's order faced its first legal challenge on 23rd of January, when a judge in Seattle heard arguments in a case brought by 4 states opposing the move: Washington, Arizona, Illinois, and Oregon. The judge, who was appointed 4 decades ago by Republican President Ronald Reagan, called Trump's order blatantly unconstitutional and ordered it to be halted for 14 days. "It boggles my mind," Judge John Coffneer said. Trump's team said they would appeal the order, adding that they believed it would eventually end up at the Supreme Court. Legal experts suggest that, given the strong precedent set by United States vs. Wong Kim Ark, 1898, any attempt to reinterpret the 14th Amendment through executive action would be unlikely to succeed. Additionally, any significant change to citizenship laws could prompt diplomatic disputes, as other nations might be unwilling to recognize stateless individuals born in the US. More than 30 countries practice automatic jus soli, or right of the soil, without restriction in almost all cases. These include the United States, Canada, and most Latin American nations, which historically embraced birthright citizenship to encourage immigration and nation building. Other countries, like the UK and Australia, allow for a modified version where citizenship is automatically granted if at least one parent is a citizen or permanent resident. European nations, including Germany and France, have also moved away from unrestricted jus soli in recent decades, introducing residency and parental citizenship requirements. However, Critics argue that such policies have led to increased statelessness and complications in national identity. If the US were to end birthright citizenship, it would align itself with countries like Japan and Switzerland, where nationality is primarily determined by lineage rather than birthplace. However, opponents warn that such a shift could introduce complex legal and bureaucratic challenges, potentially increasing the number of undocumented or stateless individuals in the country. For now, the issue is tangled up in the courts, and the future of birthright citizenship in America remains up in the air. As for illegal immigration, Trump's policies may affect America's relationships with other nations. A return to more restrictive travel bans, such as those targeting predominantly Muslim countries, could strain diplomatic relations. Additionally, cutting refugee admissions and tightening visa regulations for students and workers from certain countries may impact global perceptions of the US as a welcoming destination for immigrants. While supporters of Trump's immigration policies argue that they enhance national security and protect American jobs, critics contend that they foster division and hinder economic growth. Immigration has historically played a crucial role in the nation's development, and a drastic reduction in new immigrants could have long-term consequences for workforce demographics, innovation, and social diversity. Donald Trump's presidency is likely to bring a renewed emphasis on restrictive immigration policies, impacting both undocumented and legal immigrants. His administration may implement stricter border controls, reduce family-based immigration, and intensify enforcement efforts. While these measures may appeal to those prioritizing security and job protection, they could also disrupt communities, weaken key industries, and challenge America's reputation as a land of opportunity. The future of immigration under Trump will undoubtedly be a contentious issue, shaping the nation's identity and policies for years to come. All the next events we will witness in the coming days. Thanks for watching the video.